Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. This week we're so lucky to be joined by award-winning audiobook narrator, actor and coach Erin Moon. Erin, thank you so much for joining me on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's morning my time. How are you doing?
It's just gone 20 to 6
Oh,
evening
nice.
time for me. Yeah, so it's nearly
Yeah.
bedtime for this. That's it. It's getting all dark and cold and not going out weather at all.
That sounds like Vancouver as well. I think that like England and Vancouver have a lot of similarity in that way. We spend a lot of time wet.
Do you know? I think because I think that maybe we have it a little bit better because Vancouver gets freezing, doesn't it?
Yeah, like it's so interesting. So in Celsius, it's like when it's, well, I guess Celsius or Fahrenheit, when it's just above freezing, or when it's like 2 degrees here, Celsius, like 30 or like say 40 Fahrenheit, it feels like it's snow on the ground, parka with fur around it, mittens and mucklucks, and like it feels properly freezing cold. Whereas when I go just across the mountains to where I grew up in the prairies in Alberta, it's the same, and you're like wearing a light coat because it's so dry there. But the air here's so wet that it is just gets in your skin, the cold here. Yeah, but it doesn't stay there for very long, which is nice.
That is nice. Now, I often think that we're sort of a little bit dramatic over here in the UK because we'll just get a slight chill and think, oh, that's it. There's no point going outside ever again.
Yeah.
Just 'cause of very bit.
But I do think it's because it's wet. It's wet cold there, and I get it now. Even New York wasn't like that. You'd have snowmageddon there, and you'd be cold, proper cold, but not the kind of cold I get here.
Did I read right that you lived in New York for, was it 13 years?
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Sorry, just taking a sip of water. Yeah, it was great. So I moved there pretty much, well, it was just after, it was only about, I think, maybe 4 months after 9/11, 4 or 5 months, right after graduating school. And I loved it. It was the perfect new experience to have as an actor after just graduating. And I was with my late husband, who he like did his undergrad there, and so he knew New York, so I didn't have to feel like I don't even know where to live. Like I have no idea where to look for an apartment. I don't know how you hustle in this town. He was like, I got us. Here's the level of hustle, and my eyes like fell out of my head because I was like, that's how hard you have to hustle here. And it was really awesome for a good amount of time, and that hustle, was and did pay off. And it was funny because it was right as everything was really starting to pay off, all those years of hustle and all those relationships made, that I was like, you know what, I don't think I want to stay here. This isn't my place in the world. And so we're starting to look at places to move, and I've never lived in Vancouver, and my sister lives here, and we'd been apart for 20 years. So it was the right place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I often think that there's places where they're sort of right for the right time.
Yeah.
And that, they're sort of, you sort of get, you're at a place and it's perfect for then, and then times move on, and then somewhere else becomes the perfect place to be. And 100%. I think that's really nice.
Well, and I really needed to get a backbone. Like I've always been a really like high empathy kid, and would cry at the thought of saying something mean to someone else because of how they would feel. That kind of, that's just was my baseline. And in your, like, I was there mid-20s to mid-30s, and that was such a good time energy-wise too, to be like, yeah, I can take the sensorial overload of the subway every day and garbage and piss. I can smell you every day and be fine. And and I can hustle like that, and all of those things were like the perfect match. The city gave a lot, and then it just, as I matured And as I got that backbone and everything, and I was like, okay, and now I want to come back to a bit of my softer parts. And I want to come back to the kid who likes to spend a lot of time in nature and in the mountains and all of that. I was like, okay, I think the city's now taking more than it's giving.
Yeah.
And that's the time to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important and vital to listen to yourself as well and listen to what you sort of need and want, and that's so vital.
Yeah.
So as is tradition, the first question I always like to ask on this show, would you be able to tell us a little about your background and how you came into the world of audiobook narration?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm a classically trained actor, wanted to be an actor my whole life, or a marine biologist. It was one of the two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, acting won. And so when I graduated school, I went and did a Shakespeare festival. It was like my second year of doing that summer Shakespeare festival in Colorado, and met a boy, fell in love, and moved to New York City, and was doing the actor hustle and all the jobs that you work when you're not working. Yeah. And a friend who was also classically trained actor said, oh, I work at Recorded Books. And as any audiobook narrator knows, as soon as you tell someone you work in audiobooks, especially if they're an actor, they're like, oh my gosh, I love books. I perform. I love to read for people. And I did that same reaction as everybody does. And she was like, What I do is everything but the acting part. So she's like, I do direction, post-production, editing, proofing, mastering, the whole thing. And they really like actors to do that part of this job because we know actors. So we know how to work with actors. We know all that comes with that, with different kinds of actors. And we know literature and story. And we care about literature and story. And so I was like, okay, well, anything's got to be better than temping. And so I had an interview, and that was the perfect job. So I worked at Recorded Books at least 35 hours a week for 4.5 years, I think it was. And everybody I worked around was either a musician, a sound engineer, an MFA-trained actor. We had one woman who had a lit degree, and she ended up going and teaching literature at Brown. Like just beautiful, wonderful, gorgeous people to work with. And I got my late husband in to start narrating, which was great because he's an actor. He was an actor too. And also, eventually, I got up the guts to make a little demo. And give it to Claudia. And Claudia knew I was an actor. She had just seen me in an off-Broadway show that was really successful. And they let me go and do gigs, which was great because theater was really the thing I wanted to do. And so I had this job that I always could come back to and not feel like a jerk if I had to leave for 6 weeks. Yeah. And I had health insurance and a 401k. Like I didn't have to work gigs for my health insurance, and that was revelatory. Mm-hmm. And then Claudia was like, I gave my demo, I put it on her desk, and she's like, yeah, great. We were gonna have you do a Canadian book that we have coming out. And I was like, great, I got to call my parents and remember how the hell I talk as a Canadian. Because I had been working so hard to get rid of all my Canadianisms, and I only spoke with American dialect. And so that's actually how I got started, was doing a book that not only was Canadian, but was about the prairies. And that's where my family comes from, is my mom was a farmer in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains into the prairies. My dad grew up in Saskatchewan, which is just all prairies. And so that was really cool. And then from there, part of why they didn't love it when we crossed over is because they knew they'd lose us as post-production and directors. And that's exactly what happened. Very shortly thereafter, within about a year, I left that part of the job, and I've been narrating and coaching and stuff like that ever since.
That's fantastic. So while you were directing and doing post-production and things on that side of things, was that actor in you sort of every time you would, listen to a book being recorded, meet narrators, was that voice there just kind of going, oh, come on, you got to give it a go? Yeah,
I think it was, I did want to give it a go, but I also kind of understood the unwritten rule that was in place of, like, we want to retain you here. We
Yes.
understand that you're an actor and we're using those skills,
Yeah.
but we don't want to use that other skill that you have, but go ahead and go do gigs. So
Yeah.
it was nice because I didn't feel in any way that I was neglecting that part of myself, because I was working with people in my field and in the field of stories all that time. My whole existence was still about stories and working in a creative space and working with, creative entrepreneurs. And so it's really interesting. I didn't feel like, oh, gee, I sure wish, I could audition for this book when I was running an audition for a book. Or, I'd see colleagues of mine that I'd just seen in an audition like 2 days earlier come in, and I'm on one side of the glass and they're on the other.
Yeah.
Instead, I saw, it's interesting, I was really settled into the fact that if that put them at ease, I was also working within my field of story and with actors. So I didn't feel, I actually booked more shows as soon as I got that job because I was so much happier because I was working in the story field of creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that completely. When you did transition over to narration work, do you think it was a benefit to you that you did have all these understandings of how post-production worked, what the director expected from you? Do you think that, could you speak a little bit about how that impacted your narration work coming from that, that experience?
That's a great question, because it's a really good question for people who are starting out as well, to be aware. You know what I felt is it reminded me so much of theater school, that you do not get through theater school without doing all of the backstage work. You got to work in costumes. You got to work in lighting. You've got to work in, stage production. Stage management. Like, you don't get through a theater program without them making sure you've done at least one round in backstage, so that you know how to be a good team player.
Yeah.
And so on top of it just being an extraordinary learning experience, because, I'm working with Dion Graham and Robin Miles and George Guadal and Rosenblatt and Barbara Rosenblatt and Suzanne Torin and Carol Mond. I'm working with the people who made this industry are reading me stories all day long. It was talk about immersion. There's many ways to learn. You gotta digest what a coach gives you. You can't just then give it to somebody else. You gotta learn the lessons yourself. And I feel like I got all that time to be in immersion of all of the intricacies, understanding a little bit of, especially in the post-production side, and because we did Punch, and I've edited stream recording quite a bit, and I'll tell you, as far as a performer, I think it's an extremely inefficient way to work, because what I would hear in stream recording, and this is one of the things you learn, you wouldn't know otherwise, is you listen to actors lose the thread. So you know how we screw up sometimes 4 or 5 times?
Yeah.
And we get frustrated and we try to come back to the story.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to your pre-roll, if you haven't listened to where you were, to come just those 3 or 4 words and then start again.
Yeah.
In stream recording, all you've done is screw up, screw up, screw up, take a breath, screw up, take a breath, and then continue. By the time you've done that, you've actually lost the thread.
Yeah.
You're someplace different than where you were before. And I would edit that and have to pick, the first good part of this sentence, and then when they finally got the end of the sentence, I'm going to have to put those two together, because they've lost the plot so much in the way they begin the sentence, that now my work as an editor goes up exponentially. And I'm an actor, so I'm not a sound engineer. So I cared about that. For me, making sure that the continuity of the story that went through when I edited those pieces together was very important. I can't say that would be the experience of every sound engineer. I don't know. But because to me that was important, and as a performer that was important, that's how I edited stream. But every time I edited it, I hated it, because it was so sad to listen to actors just kind of lose it. So like I wouldn't know that if I hadn't have done that job. So that's also made me really, as a coach, be like, you got to learn punch. Like for your performance skills, it's just a mind body thing. You got to figure out, you got to get going on. And also understanding in post-production how important it is to be on top of your own continuity. So Carol Monda would always come into the studio and ask to listen to the last 5 to 10 minutes of what she'd done the day before. And I remember thinking, classy, and she is super classy, and care. Care about the listener experience and the continuity from one day to another. And I've done that for a long time as a narrator because I see the value of it and as an editor, I know when it's like one chapter ends and the next day it's like, holy crud, did they just wake up? It's like, hello, and now I'm talking like this the next day, and not much has happened in the story. So you're like, no, they didn't get that didn't work. So those kind of lessons were really, I think, like any time you want to do post-production, like I know a lot of new narrators will end up editing their own stuff. And I'm a big advocate for use a sound engineer whenever humanly possible to do your editing. And part of that is like, if you want to edit your friend's stuff. Be an editor, but not for your own stuff. Do an exchange with some other new narrator who also edits. Like have somebody just at least do the proof edit. Mastering is, you can do your own mastering, fine. But at least have someone do a proof edit. Because if you proof edit other people's stuff, you will learn what makes an engineer's life easier. And that's your team. Like I have a bit higher pickups. And so I want all the rest of my work for an editor to be easy peasy. Because I know they're going to have a little bit higher load for pickups. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I want to be responsible to my relationship with my business partners.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And to be honest with you, that's exactly kind of what I've ended up doing myself. So my sister is a sound engineer.
Oh my gosh!
I know, right? What are the chances? So it's incredible. So obviously, I'm using her. She edits all of my work, but I'm also an editor. I edit for other narrators as well. But I will not touch my own work, and I think that it's so valuable having her, a second pair of ears before that goes off to anybody, and also, obviously it helps that she's a sound engineer herself. But I think that's so important. And the things that I've learned as well, editing for other narrators and narrators who are a lot more experienced than I am, and the things that you can pick up, and the bits of wisdom that they can give you in email transactions and such. I think it's
it's like all of the little pieces of the business that you get the opportunity for. And I think it's also really important because, this is the whole, like, be a listener, dear Lord, be a listener. Because if you're listening to a variety of people, you also kind of get to see what is the lexicon of audio content for story that is out there for audiobooks. And when people, for instance, are narrators who make subtler choices for characters, and then when there are narrators who make bigger choices for characters, and then you hear those same narrators in a different book and they make very different choices, you understand that they're crafting a whole experience that is based on maybe direction. So it might just be straight up, I was directed to be subtler in this book, I was directed to be bigger in this book. So might be that. It also might be genre-based, and it also might be, this story really called for this. Or like their career. Listen to something that Julia Wayland did 10 years ago and listen to where she is now. And both are gorgeous, but they are very different. And so we're all on our own artistic journey too, and we go through ebbs and flows, and we get a vibe off a book, and we're like, oh, this book is asking for this. And this book is asking for this. And part of what your journey is in learning is recognizing that. That's actually like one of the biggest things is that literary analysis aspect of like, what is calling? And because when I read a book, just read, I get that same feeling. Sometimes the pictures are vibrant. Sometimes they're sepia. So I want to match that in what I'm trying to, as I'm being book auntie and bringing it out into the world in this new form and like taking care of this book baby. I want to be mindful that every child is not the same.
Do you know, that brings me on to 3 words that I saw written across a few of your platforms, which is heart, humour and honesty. 3 very powerful words displayed on your website and other platforms. Could you tell us why these 3 words, these pillars, mean so much to you in your work?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. For me, that's like the root or the basis from which I just naturally come to my work as an actor. Honesty being the biggest overweening one, because it's kind of like underneath honesty lie heart and humor. You know, my heart has to be in it for honesty to work, but I need to be aware in the honest relationship that I have with the text and with the story around, is this a moment of my hand on my chest and a moment where I am deeply in a heart space of human experience? Or am I being sassy? Or am I being dry? Or because, dear Lord, humor matters in our experience as human beings. And I also think that that's what I really enjoy, is I enjoy playing like a sassy character. And I really enjoy being in that heart space. And it's an easy place for me to settle in. But all of them fall under my fundamental job, which is to be honest, in honest relationship with the text, to be in honest relationship with myself, to make sure I'm not pushing and grasping towards something, that I'm being vulnerable enough to go on the ride and trust that my human experience of these given circumstances is enough for someone to come along with me. That I have to live it. If I live it honestly, they will come. And at the end of the day, not everybody's going to come along with you, because we can't serve everybody ever, as we all know from our reviews. I can't sound like Siri and be too animated in the same book. But apparently that occurs.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. The best one that I had was, I did a book where two main characters. One was British and one was standard American. Obviously, for the British, I used my own voice, and the top comment was, "God, the guy really struggles with a British accent." It's like, out of the 2, I really thought that was the one I had down. Like,
I don't think you're alone either. I've heard that from so many people where they're like, "Oh, that Appalachian was terrible," and they're like, "I grew up in Appalachia." That is literally where I grew up. Yeah. I also had one time, her French was terrible. I mean, I don't speak French, but her French was terrible. And I was like, and I had like the best research. I worked like all the things, but it's so funny because it's it's that you have to take a breath as a narrator and go, I am an artist. I will not, cannot serve all people. That is not reality of artistry.
No, absolutely. I was reading your glowing testimonials, and I noticed that a fair few were praising your accent work. Would you mind taking us through your process on how you develop accents and how you would approach one that perhaps you were unfamiliar with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I've always really liked accent. I'm a singer, so I have an ear for the modulation of things. We'll put it that way. And so I've always played, as many actors have, kind of within the accent realm. A lot of my work is hearing and mimicking. So hearing and mimicking gives me the chance to feel where it is in my mouth and in my body. Like, where does it sit? Like, why is that around? If I'm going, oh, that's really, like, it's back in the, it's like there's a lot of uvularity, and there's a lot of space in the back of my throat. And even if I'm not doing something so thick in Scottish, it still has a very, like, it's got a different space in the back of my mouth. Like, and there's back and forward sound. So I'm like, oh, okay. But I have to mimic it and mimic it and mimic it. And then I can start to play and feel how it is in my mouth. And sometimes I will learn to specific things because I'm a classically trained actor. I do have a skill set around placement. So if somebody talks about placement, that can be a key opening for me. But a lot of the time, it's doing that. And then with audiobooks, it's also kind of like audiobook efficiency with language. There's audiobook efficiency with accent. That at the end of the day, are people from an area, kind of no matter what, going to be able to notice once in a while or more than once in a while that I'm not from that place? Probably across the board, because we all are tuned into our own individual ways of speaking. And is it enough? Because they already know that I'm American and Canadian. They know that. They know that heading in, because my first person or third person limited narrative is in my natural way of speaking.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then they're already forgiving me. That there's already a relationship that we're developing around the suspension of disbelief, which is, it is disbelieving and kind of unbelievable that we all do what we do, where we play 50 people in a book. They get it. Yeah. They're like, that troll sounded a lot like that elf. And so there's a suspension of disbelief and a care relationship that happens between our listeners and us. So I also, for me, it's about making sure that I'm hitting fundamental sound and rhythm and placement, so that if there's a sound or two off within, that it's going to not jolt people out of the dialogue so much that they miss the end of the sentence. Like, that my job is to make sure when throughout all my narration that I'm not, as much as possible, I'm not bouncing the listener out of the experience of the story, the overall story. My job is to keep them hooked into the overall story. So with different accents like that I have trouble with, I'll start looking, I'll get YouTube, I'll get conversations. I love accenthelp.com because the resources are gorgeous if you're an auditory listener or an auditory learner like I am. So I'll download one of their accent things and I'll pop through a whole bunch of the conversational stuff. And I'm like, oh, there's a lyricism. I don't like it so much when people read something. I want them in conversation. Because most of the time when I'm voicing these accents, almost all the time, I'm in dialogue. I'm not in narration. Yeah. So, and I know that might be different for you because you might do whole books in an American accent. But I feel like, for me, all my accent work is done in dialogue. So I want to hear people in conversation. I want to hear the rhythm. I want to hear little bits. And then I basically choose what are the main things, where's the general placement, and let's hang out in that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it so fascinating. And you're absolutely right about I do feel myself, if I'm tackling an accent or something, I have to spend, hours and hours and hours, days really, with it going on in my head, listening to, as you say, conversations. So are you like that? Like if you go abroad or, travel somewhere, or even, you might just hear an accent in your hometown, which are you immediately listening? Oh, hang on a second.
I'm a creeper. I start putting my recording thing on. I've been in taxis and been purposefully engaging a taxi driver in conversation just so that I've got a good accent tag. Such a creeper. And I also do I'll watch movies. Like if I've got a tough one, oh my gosh, I just think of if I ever had a main character that was Welsh, for instance, which is to me, because it has glimmers of Scottish and glimmers of Irish and glimmers of this and glimmers of that. And it's got all these just too close to too many accent things going on with it. And such an incredible culture of its own that I want to honor it. Yeah. I would be on all of the Welsh podcasts. I would be listening to Welsh. I'll listen to narrators, Welsh narrators. I'll listen to a whole book I knew I was heading into a Scottish series, and I was like, blow my ears off. Like everything was Scottish all the time, so that I could feel that very deeply in my bones. And it's almost like you hear a language after a while. You start to hear it all the time. And then from there, I can have more confidence that I can head into that work. So I'm like, I just want all that. I want to be steeped in that accent to go there.
Absolutely. I think Scottish must be one of the harder ones. I think because my partner's family are Scottish, and grandfather's from Fife and stuff. But he's from this, like, where you really, and I mean this cheekily as a Brit to the Scots. I cannot understand a word of it. It's so thick.
That's
and
like
so
the thick Aberdeeners. Well, it's all around there and you can't really understand what they're talking. You're like, I don't know how you're not choking on your tongue, but I also don't understand how you, like, wow. And that there's a little bit of Gaelic in there too. Like there's these words that you wouldn't understand, because they are actually, it's like, when people quote unquote speak Spanglish, where there's an amalgamation between two languages. It's same with the Celtic, with Irish. It's like when it's Irish and English, or when it's Scottish and English together, you're like, oh, I'm actually not sure if I am hearing English right now, because I might be hearing a colloquial Scottish word mixed in there. It's so fascinating, and it has to be intelligible at the end of the day.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah, no,
but our work.
Right. I think, that's the thing. I've done a few books myself where the characters have been from the true Highlands, sort of way north past Skye, like Ullapool area. And you're like, I'm going to have to sort of lower it a little bit, because otherwise it's not going to be very very intelligible. Anyway, but I would love to know more about your time coaching, and about what the coaching that you offer. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, you bet. So because of my background, because classically trained actor, and then 4.5 years of directing and working on the other side of the glass, I pretty quickly started offering workshops with my friends at Brick Shop. So Rob and Chris, we all worked together at Recorded Books, and they were some of the first to spin off from the larger companies and build these smaller audiobook production companies that had self-tape booths that they made, and also just a smaller production house, because these bigger production houses like Recorded Books, Audible, all these big guys couldn't satisfy how many backlist books were being done, how much was happening, and ACX happened. So as soon as that happened, there was opportunity for some of the sound engineers who were in these larger companies to do these smaller spin-off audiobook production companies. Pete Rowan did it as well. There's a bunch of people doing it at that time, which is about like, I want to say like 2009 or something like that. And so we started offering workshops there, and we did it. It's funny because I wouldn't do it now. We're all learning. It was like, we work with you one day, and then the next day we do a demo. Like basically, you'll get one audiobook demo out of it. Now I never do a singular weekend or a singular training where it's like, we're going to do training, and at the end, on this exact date with this exact time frame, you will have a demo. I don't do that, and I don't agree with it, actually, because there's every group of people I've taught since, and even within that first learning experience, we learned very fast. We were like, oh, right. Some people just really aren't ready yet. They've got so much learning to do, and everybody's learning styles are different. Everybody needs more time, less time. Everybody has more or less time to learn a new skill, because that's real. We're all trying to work our normal jobs as we add this other thing in. So now my coaching can consist of me working with authors who are going to narrate their own books, which I highly recommend. All authors, get coaching. Dear Lord, get coaching before you do your own book. By people who do this. It can just I believe it settles your nervous system, which makes you more accessible to your own work, or to any work. When you settle into performance coaching. And then for newer narrators, a lot of it is business coaching, expectation setting, understanding how they're going to layer this into their lives, their learning process. a little bit at the early stages, me just saying, you really want to do it? Great. Let's not go on ACX and audition for a book and then get a book and not be able to accomplish it.
Yes.
Because so many people, that's their story, is being really excited, which is awesome. Never want to kill that. Being really excited about something, feeling like it must be super easy. It's just reading a book, auditioning because there's a platform for it, and then not being able to accomplish it in a way, because it's out there for all people for all time, in a way that is not stressful as all get out, doesn't make you feel like an imposter, doesn't make you feel like you're screwing it up. All these things that, like, why invite that level of self-loathing and yuckiness, and the story is so common of feeling like crap during your first book, that I'm like, don't kill the thing you love. Learn the thing you love, then do the thing you love. Practice, like, settle your nervous system, be good to yourself, learn all the tech stuff, because it's super hard at first to learn that stuff. Don't learn it while you're also trying to perform something. Be an avid listener, like all the things you can do to set yourself up for success. So a lot of when I'm working with new narrators, it's just giving them tools. And not that are based purely on me. Like, it's like, here's a tool, go learn on your own. I get that this is expensive. Here's all the things you can do before you save up money to work with me. Or if I'm not working for you, here are 5 other coaches that I adore, that are beautiful people who are caring and are good at what they do and know this business inside and out. Work with them too, get their opinions. Because performance is, I'm not the person who holds the right or wrong for performance, nor is any coach. There is no one way. So you got to get feedback from a few people, see what's similar, listen to the similar things, the things that are different or in opposition even maybe to each other, you get to pick and choose, because it's an art. Yeah. So if one coach says, oh, your character voices are way too big, and then the other coach says, you know what, those are spot on, you get to decide, okay, is it somewhere in between, or it, like, does it feel good where I am? Do I want to tone it down? And then you could reflect back, go back to that coach that said they're just right, and say, I'm trying this. What do you think about this? And then they can go, you know what, that's not enough. Then you go back to the one who liked it big, hear what they have to say, so that you get to also mold your own craft. So a lot of when I'm working with new narrators, it's about just helping them start the education journey, and then of course giving feedback, and working toward getting the demo pieces together. So working toward just getting material. And it's like, I don't want to work with you just on any old material. I want to work toward something that's going to help your business. For newer people, that's demos. We're going to work on, slowly start to gather the demos depending on the skill set, because people come into this work and they're not actors. So now we got to learn how to be an actor. We got to learn how to translate the lived experience into somebody else's given experiences of a lived experience, and figure out how to translate that in your individual body. And then there's people who are actors. It's a faster track. And then people who are more established, it's about check-ins. It's about, okay, let's see. Oh, you know what? You could mine the text a little bit more here. Or let's pay attention to that white space on the page. Like, let's give a beat. Notice your beat shifts. How many times are you shifting your subtext? Because that's what's actually happening in the story. So let's get a little bit more of the goodness out of this text. So it kind of ends up being that progression with people.
Yeah. Do you find it rewarding being a part of that progression of following a narrator's journey, from possibly the very beginning to, getting that first job and stuff? Is that is that fun for you?
I love it. Yeah, I really love it. I just, to be at a place in my life where I can really fundamentally help other humans live their best life. It's like, yes, I will take that any day of the week. And I can only fit in so much because I'm doing my own creative journey. Yeah. But I love, I have a coaching student who was nominated for an Audie last year.
Oh, wow.
And when I first worked with her, it was new. She was an actor. Like, she went to college in acting, but she'd been away from it for about 10 years. And then she was coming back to it. And boy, it was lighting her up. But she believed that there was a lot of things around how she had to be set up that were constricting her or kind of holding her back and things. And so we just slowly really got her confidence up and got her specificity up and got those things going. And then, you know, to see that was like, that's all her. Like, I'm just a support system for what people already are doing, and you got to do it yourself. Like, a good coach is just someone who takes you forward for where you are already going. Because coaching is your coaching client. It's based on their motivation. It's based on their stick-to-itiveness. It's based on what they do when they're not with you. It's not, you're not like alchemically, mysteriously making something. No. You are just taking somebody on the journey that they have set out for themselves. You're helping to reflect things back to them and help them to move forward. So I love that. It's very rewarding.
Oh, fantastic! Oh, well, congratulations to your student for that audio. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so awesome. Oh.
Networking and growing your name and business is something that we're told is, of course, such an important part of this industry. In your experience, what are the best ways for narrators to grow their brand, as it were, to get their name out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting because there's a lot of talk about this and there's a lot of opinions. So one of the things I do for my coaching clients is I take a lot of webinars. I take a lot of workshops and stuff like that. And mostly I take it a little bit for myself. But a lot of my relationships are well exercised. Yeah. So I'm taking a lot of that stuff. I've taken a lot around demos, and I've taken a lot around networking and marketing to learn for myself, but also to hear what is the same thing as getting a few coaches. What are most people saying? What is only being said once in a while? And what is in opposition?
Okay.
And so the what I can speak to is what I hear most often and what I see.
Yeah.
And what I see is there is an idea that social media is the place where I am doing my marketing and promotion. So sometimes that's what people feel. I think it's a bit of the FOMO stuff of like, I have to be engaged on all of these sites on a regular basis, letting everybody know all the things I'm doing all the time. Yeah. And I will say for that, that's not really reaching producers so much. Think about how many actors are out there, how many producers are out there. They are not following us unless they have an already established relationship with us that goes beyond work and into friendship. So they're celebrating us as a colleague friend.
Yeah.
It is a great way to get the industry, meaning other narrators, maybe some smaller producers, and authors. So it's a way to get you engaged in the author world because authors are also self-promoting. So essentially we're self-promoting to ourselves, to our own community, which is authors and narrators when we're engaging on social media. That's a lot of what we're doing, and listeners, which is really lovely. And I don't feel like in my early career I had as much access to listeners. And I love having relationships with listeners because I'm a listener. I might be doing the book, but you know, it's not, I'm not sitting in a tiny booth by myself, not in front of a live audience because I need accolades immediate. Like I'm not doing, my listener engagement is about me too. I love that book too. I love that author as well. Yeah. It's not, yes, I know I did a brilliant job on that book. It's because I get to be with the listeners, and that's a wonderful engagement. So for social media, it's other narrators, authors, and listeners. That's who you're engaging with. So producers, and maybe some of the smaller producers, like the narrators who have created production companies. Yeah, there's more and more of that kind of popping up and popping and then going away and popping and going away and kind of all that. Because we love employing our friends, which is awesome, and our colleagues, providing opportunity, right? Yeah. And so you are engaging on social media, I think, in those ways. And how much you do that and how you do that, I don't think there's a method. I do not believe that. I don't believe there is one way. I believe that one person's success, or what they deem as success, is personal to their own opinion about success, their own ideology around marketing and promotion, and that there is no one way to accomplish success in this business, period. And you don't have to engage on social media. You choose to engage on social media, and then you choose how and why and how much you want to engage in those spaces based on your own self and how it makes you feel and what time you have and how much is your cost-benefit ratio and all those different things. And there isn't a formula for that. There's a few different methodologies that you could play with and see if it works, but I don't think there's a single way.
Yeah.
And then with publishers, it's the old-fashioned way of developing honest business relationships. Be you. If there's kind of book you like and you want to contact and cold call, essentially via email, because we don't call, email a publisher, then it's like, oh my gosh, I just listened to so-and-so do this book. It better be from their production house. It was so amazing. Thank you so much. That was great. That's a great way to start a conversation. Or maybe it's, hey, I did a fantasy that I loved. I would please keep me in mind for any fantasies that you have that are within the urban fantasy romance, genre. Help them cast you. That's what a lot of producers say. Help me cast you by telling me what you want to do. And know thyself. So know what you're good at too. And then over time, developing, going to conferences, meeting people in a natural way. You can be the person who goes around to every table and puts, your sticker or your card or your whatever in, and that's fine. That's part of how people make engagements happen. You can also be the person, I'm going to point to myself right now, who will absolutely and totally engage in conversation as it comes up naturally, as people meet at a conference. My friend's talking to so-and-so, I go over to talk to my friend. Whatever we talk about is whatever we talk about.
Yeah.
And some of it might be what we do for a living, and some of it might be about what I did over the holidays, or I've got this trip coming up. Have you ever been to, or, oh, you went where? Oh, what was that like? Asking people some questions about themselves, the normal ebb and flow of conversation. For me, that works better. It settles me and myself. It's the slow game, and I'm okay with that. So I think that, and you can participate in all of the different things that are out there where you essentially are live auditioning for people. Like Dan has the master classes, and Chris Chula has his stuff on Thursday nights. There's the speed dating, and then there's Meet the Producers with APAC. There's all sorts of ways. There's watching a webinar that PANA is offering, and then engaging that producer afterwards. Maybe wait a couple weeks because they're going to get a lot of emails right away, and say thank you so much. These 2 takeaways were monumental for me, and I really appreciate it. It's so nice to get to know you, because you've said I've gotten to know you. And now you're starting the conversation of them getting to know you back. Yeah.
I get that.
So there's a lot of different ways, and I'm always a bit rebellious against anyone who says there's one way. I know a lot of narrators who are on social media who do very well for themselves.
I couldn't agree with you more. And also I just think starting, building relationships just by talking and not trying to pressure anybody into anything, or trying to force your business card down their throat. I think that's got to be a good thing, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's what makes me most comfortable.
Yeah.
also even engaging on social media. It's like I'm doing that to my own individual comfort level and what makes me feel fun and light, and also what helps my authors. Like most of my work, honestly, is through producers. So I get nothing from promoting these authors' work except for the fact that I love their work and they worked bloody hard. And now I have the opportunity. My whole life is based on taking a person's work that they've labored over for way longer than I'm going to labor over it and bringing it into the world in another way. It is our kind of work together, but most of that work is theirs if I've done my job well. And so I want to help the authors keep writing our stories. I'm happy to embody stories till the cows come home. It's absolutely my lot in life. It's very important to me, that level of my contribution within getting story out there. And to do that, these authors need support. They need readers and listeners. So I don't care if they listen or if they read. I want them to get that author's book because I liked it.
Yeah. I think, absolutely. 100%. I read that you have a certification in applied positive psychology.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about that, and if this has positively affected your work as a narrator and as an actor and running a business.
Yeah. I did that. My friend runs this huge program. She did her master's in positive psychology, Amelia Zhivatovskaya. It's taken me years to say her last name.
That's a tricky one.
I love you, Easy. So Zhivatovskaya. I know, I hope I got it right. But I know, I've been practicing. So it's through the Flourishing Center. And basically, she got her master's in positive psych. And she saw that the basic part, the really fundamental parts of positive psych needed to be learned by everyone. Like it should be in high school. It should be Psych 101 in college. Like everybody needs these tools to just be good sisters and brothers and siblings and colleagues and friends and partners and coaches. However and whatever you're doing, it's looking at what takes people north of neutral. So I said about what helps people thrive. And so positive psychology isn't about looking into the past and deconstructing that and trying to find out what the patterns are and all that. That's outside of that would be the next kind of psychology. And especially a 200-hour course is basically just it's for coaches and teachers and, CEOs on how to engage with the people around you in a way that helps them thrive, gives them the opportunity to thrive, because again, it's they have to take that and run. And although the idea, when I first took it, I remember thinking, oh God, I can't do something that is called positive psychology because it sounds like it's just like put a happy face on it and everything will be all right. And that's not how I live. I've gone through enough in my life to know that if I can't honor my dark, deep corners, I got nothing. And I do story for a living. Like it's about dark, deep corners all the time. It's about the biggest parts of people's lives. And positive psych isn't about that. It's actually about honoring how you are feeling and looking at how you want to move forward, honoring that there's an ebb and flow. Honoring that you're going to go back into there and then you're going to come out, and what are the tools that you have to move forward. So as a coach, it's helped me hear better what somebody is asking, be able to reflect that back to them so that they get to hear it and go, oh yeah, no, I don't. And oh yes, I do. And then once they choose the yes, I do or the no, I don't part of what I reflect back to them, we come up with a plan together that is self-motivated from them to move forward, right? So that I can, as much as possible, help them to move forward in whatever thing that they're offering. it's also just helped me be like a better friend and a better sister, I think, like a better auntie and colleague, because I have more mindful tools about how I listen and how I speak to people, when and how I react to things. Like it was that, and all of my work in the yoga space. So I'm a yoga therapist as well. Yeah. All those things, I think, help me to live from a more mindfully authentic, open-hearted space that I hope reflects in what I offer whomever I'm coaching or teaching in whatever space. And, being a good colleague too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I often find, I think, I do believe that everything is connected. If something's not right, in your head, it's going to be reflected in your body. It's going to be reflected in your work, and it's going to be reflected. How you feel reflects how you treat people and all that sort of thing. And I think that it's something that isn't really, maybe even on this podcast we talk a lot about tech and process and the sort of nuts and bolts of production, but we don't speak enough about kind of that well-being for somebody who's going to setting out on this journey of being self-employed, of growing a business, growing themselves, and everything that comes with that, because it isn't just about the nuts and bolts of that process. It's about how to cope with the successes, but also the things that are challenging and don't always go your way.
Yeah, and like those, it's all the things of even being aware of scarcity mindset and growth-oriented mindset, and what are those things, and how do we use language that helps ourselves and the people we work with live within an abundance mindset and live within an ideology that is growth-oriented, as opposed to I am this is it, and everything that's fixed mindset. That it inevitably, and in art, I'm a big believer that fixed mindset it's very difficult to live in an artistic space that is inevitably malleable and moving and gone there and gone in an instant. And we don't go back on our books 4 times and get every sentence right. So we have to learn how to trust that the overall story is the thing. There's not a single story recorded by a single narrator who is the best at what they do, where every emphasis in every sentence was right. Like I gotta trust that I'm on a journey, and I have to learn how to let go of some of that stuff. And that's all growth oriented, and abundance, I think, also abundance mindset oriented. And all of that language that comes from taking the Positive Psych course. And I, being a language person, I needed the codification of those ideas. I needed the semantics of those ideas to name feelings that I had, to name reactions that I had when I would hear things that were fixed mindset oriented, to notice patterns that I had that would be scarcity mindset. That's one of the things I still work on all the time, is scarcity mindset. and so having those things named makes such a difference in how I participate in the world. And that inevitably is about how I feel. Like you said, like being a creative entrepreneur, being a heart centered kind of entrepreneur, like it's a squishy place to hang out, and it's vulnerable, and it's nice to be able to talk to your colleagues about the fact that that may look over there, and the shined up marketing of that all that is just happening, and here, look at all these books, and it's like, yeah, but their work-life balance might be fundamentally different than yours. What do you want yours to be? Yeah. I want my weekends. I want to be able to take vacation. That means I'm not going to do 100 books a year. Yeah. I'm really okay with that. Like, totally fine. Yeah. Because my income, work-life balance, because it's the things together, works for me. Yeah. So it's listening to that and being able to have the language around that to reflect back to friends, colleagues, and coaching people, that helps them find that for themselves. And it's going to take time. It ebbs and flows.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's occasionally maybe back to that hustle culture. You mentioned in New York that hustle and that getting in there, and I think it's we can find that online of you're supposed to if you love something and if you love if you love the work that you do. It should be known that you don't have to do it 24 hours a day. You can take a vacation for a week and still love what you do and need a bit of time.
Because otherwise you kill the thing you love.
Exactly.
Do you want to kill the thing you love? Because guess what? You will kill the thing you love if it becomes a labor.
Yeah.
And I know even when we're not killing the thing we love, some days it can be like a labor because your brain is just not firing the way you need it to. And you're like, why can't I read words? I do it all the time. And it's just giving that space around it of, I am a creative. I get to also, therefore, create the life I want to live. These are all parts of being my own boss. It means that the only person who's keeping me in that booth all day, it's not the higher, it's actually me saying no. It's me saying I'm booked until. It's me making sure that when I'm booking, I always book extra time on every book. It's making sure that when I get a script, is it the final script or the prep script? Because if I'm prepping from a prep script and I like to mark up my script, that means I got to read a book twice, and I'm not, that's fine for a new narrator, but I'm at this point in my career not gonna do that ever. So I'm going to create boundaries around my work that work for my life and that work within the industry. It still has to work within what people are what expectations exist in the industry. So you've just you have to create those things for yourself. And nobody can tell you what those are. And I think as social media, because I've seen the boom in social media for audiobooks in just the last 3 years, really. There is an idea, especially when people, this is the time of year, folks, when people start to list how many books they've done. Let it go. Maybe skip over those posts. If you notice yourself being in the comparative space and in scarcity mindset, if that elicits that for you, then stop. Just scroll right past it. It has nothing to do with your life. You don't know what those books are. You don't know what else that person has going on in their life, how they've crafted their life, what their vocal cords can handle. Mine can only handle so much. I can't record for 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. My throat will fall out of my mouth. It won't work, So that kind of comparative isn't actually helpful to anybody. It's somebody feeling proud of themselves because of what they've set for themselves. It has nothing to do with you, and you don't know the parameters of it. So I will say that I think those kind of things in the social media realm can be helpful and interesting, but we have to kind of hold it with a soft awareness around what our needs are. Yeah. And that this is a business and it ebbs and flows and grows. And, even the best narrators I know that have been in this business forever have had months where they don't work. Okay. So, where they get one book and they haven't worked, and it's in 6 weeks, they've only got one book. It happens. It's okay. It will move forward. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's so important to remember and to share. Absolutely. I have one final question to ask, if that's okay. I can't believe this last hour has flown. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. You as well. But I just wanted to know if is there any upcoming projects that you're working on right now that we can look forward to? Yeah. What do I have coming up? So, I have through PANA on November 16th, I am teaching casting your audiobooks, how to play all the parts. It's geared toward newer narrators and intermediary narrators, looking at, I'll break down POV, I'll break down like first person, third person limited, omniscient, second person, and then I'll go into just what tools do you have in your tool belt, what things can you explore for characters, and then how to track those different methodologies for tracking. And then basically we'll have an open Q&A, and like if somebody's trying to work out something and they want to bring in a bit, like I'm open to all things to happen in the last half hour. So I have that coming up, and it's for PANA members only right now. That's the education committees. I'm on the education committee, and it's our first kind of like attempted rollout for our members, and that's the Professional Audiobook Narrators Association. It's a new association created for and by audiobook narrators. And then as far as books, I just had the second installment of a really cute cozy mystery that came out. The first one's called Cheddaroff Dead.
Nice.
And the second one's called Gone for Gouda.
Love it.
And during a time when the world is exploding, I will say a cozy mystery has been so good for my heart. So good for my heart. And I also have done an urban fantasy series called the Jane Thorne series. And it looks like I'm going to be going to a lot of countries. So I was in Ireland last. This one I was in Paris, and I think the next one might be in Italy. So that one's really fun. Yeah, it's fun because it exercises all those muscles of like, oh God, how many people am I going to be in this accent today? And you know, so it's pretty fun for that.
Oh, fantastic! They sound brilliant, and yeah, wishing you all the very best as you go into production with those. And that just about does it for this episode of the Audiobook Club. All the relevant links to social media accounts and Erin's coaching will be available in the show notes. Erin, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me.